So we need leadership at every level of the education system, but also at every level of policy and in the sectors that would ensure that kids have access to adequate health care and nutrition, and that our communities are actually developing economically. We also think a lot about the importance of ensuring that that leadership that we're developing is very diverse and inclusive. And then finally, we need a lot of individual leaders because we need to take on a lot of pieces of the puzzle, but we really desperately need a collective approach. And we think a lot, and this is very much easier said than done, but about how we ensure that we are, within communities, helping create the space essentially for folks to rise up from their individual pursuits and think together, reflect together, grow the collective wisdom, have the debates and discussions, and develop shared vision, because we've come to believe that that's the only path to the kind of transformative and sustainable change that we need.
I agree wholeheartedly with Wendy that to improve schools, we have to look beyond schools. But within school, we know the research suggests that other than the teacher, the next most important factor in the quality of student learning is the quality of leadership. And I think anyone who's ever been in a system role here, trying to look after a group of schools or even a whole country of schools, knows it's very hard to get schools to implement what you'd like them to implement. So the solution is now to build adaptive capacity at the school site, rather than to ask the schools to deliver with fidelity what you've already told them to do. To build the agility in schools, to take the policy intent, but then make it work within their organisation. And I think it's about the practices we use, not the roles we're in. Principal wellbeing surveys show us many principals across at least OECD countries where I have the most experience are working 55-hour weeks. So the question is, for those who have their hands on the levers of the future and the institutions that are creating the future, they don't have time to have lunch. So how are we going to help them think about where they want to head in their school?
When we think about this across the Teach for All network, there are a million other things to be done. And I would just ask the question of, what if we stopped doing a lot of them and just did this? Whether or not we're making the progress we need to see is always about whether or not we've got enough local leadership capacity.
One, yes, parents matter. Of course they do. Depending what research you look at, somewhere between 50 and up to 70% of the variance in standardized achievement scores that we look at, the variance is accounted for outside the school. It's huge. It shouldn't surprise us. So we must engage with community.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Hebsgaard, Dean of Executive and Professional Ed at Georgetown University. And one of my observations after living here for 12 years is that when we talk about leadership development here, we frequently bring in people from the West who think that they can tell people in the region what it means to be a good leader. And before we do that, we need to understand assumptions about leadership that are relevant in the culture here. And quite often we don't do that. We say we'll teach them with an MEd program and we'll make them good leaders for schools. And it just doesn't work that way. So there's a kind of arrogance that the West brings about their understanding of leadership that they believe is a one world fits all type of solution. And I'd really like to see us all commit when we come to speak with the people that we're going to work with and find out what leadership means before we move on and try to impart some knowledge with them.
How do you create an ecosystem that trusts each other when many other factors are creating distrust and division? And you were talking about the collective approach, Wendy, building in partnerships. When each of you deeply distrusts the political agenda and believes there are identity issues that are at play, how do you create this collective? Let me come to you first.
We will not see significant and sustainable change in education without deeply locally rooted leadership. Leaders who are deeply rooted in the local culture and context and have deep and trusting relationships within communities. At the same time, we have seen that those local leaders can move a lot more quickly when they're exposed to what's possible and what's working in other contexts. And I think that speaks to why we need greater investment in helping our educators learn from each other across borders. You know, we need both of those things. We need to make a much more intentional effort to cultivate the locally rooted leaders we need, and at the same time, part of that is giving those folks an opportunity to do what we're doing here today, like to actually learn from each other across borders. What I'm amazed by, there are now 46 of these organizations in the Teach for All network, and whether they're in India or Peru or the next place, we've just seen the transformational power. Not only for kids, of course, incredible teachers have a huge impact on kids, but the kids have a huge impact on teachers. You know, when those teachers are successful, they gain essentially the foundations of the kind of leadership we need. I go all around the world and ask these folks who initially come in committing 2 years to teach in high-need communities. They never leave the work, by the way. When I ask them, what did you learn during the 2 years that's informed what you've done next? They all say the same things, and they fall into two kind of categories. One, they realize the complexity of the issue. You know, we need more of our donors, to one of the questions, and policymakers and such to teach in low-income communities. And they will soon realize we will never solve this problem by giving every kid a computer, by fixing the teachers, or by doing any one other thing. Like, it's just plain whack-a-mole, right? We need to take it on in its full complexity. And you see that when you're teaching. What you also gain when you're successful is an incredible and unshakable sense of possibility in what you can accomplish and what your kids can accomplish. And that fuels a lifetime of the kind of bold and transformational leadership we need to see. And I'll just wrap by saying I could not agree more with the notion of we have to really figure out how to reorient folks to realize we may be able to change the way the world communicates overnight, and we may be able to solve diseases with a vaccine like that. We're not going to make the progress we need with any quick fix in education. This is a long game, and every day that we don't decide we're going to buckle down and play the long game of developing the leadership capacity we need, we just defer the possibility of real progress.
So there are big decisions for our system leader friends in the room. Do you think educational change is mostly technical problems or adaptive problems? Do you think you work in complicated machines that smart technocratic consultants in a room can find the answer to, and if only those educators would just deliver with fidelity what we gave them, we could get the improvements? Or do you believe these are complex biological ecosystems of human interactions which keep changing on you as you change them? And therefore, if you believe in the second, which I'm now convinced of, the type of leadership capacity we need is what Wendy's talking, it's collective. But then we need to give them the processes to solve problems in their context, to adapt the best evidence-based solutions to make them work for them. So design learning for leaders that is, one, intrinsically engaging, that's deeply relevant to the problems that they find, and help them make small little actions, the smallest little habit change that would actually improve the efficacy of their leadership. If you can help them act in a small, manageable way and give them evidence-informed approaches that makes them better at their work, they'll come back for another morsel of training. So the only thing I've probably learnt that's really stuck out to me in the last year is motivation is not a prerequisite to start the leadership learning process. Get them started small, something that almost requires no motivation to change. And as they make progress, they develop motivation. Motivation is a byproduct of making progress.
You know, do we really need a kind of an effort from the outside to cultivate leadership capacity? Can't we, what about the leadership capacity already present in communities? And I think that's such a beautiful question because, again, that's our experience, is that the leaders are right there. They're the kids in our classrooms, they're the other teachers in the schools, the others in the communities.